Hi, I'm Timothy Swift. Continuing with my Swift chats. Today we have Rodney Anton. Rodney is a financial planner. I think I have that title right. Yes?
Financial planner, portfolio manager. Yeah, I have a
Okay.
bunch of different names, but
Okay.
yeah, that works for today's call.
It's Rodney. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay. So Rodney, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, if you would.
yeah, happy to. I've been in the business for almost 15 years now, so I've got I would say a wide range of experiences. Actually, the only thing I've ever done, I did it right out of university, a finance and accounting background. I kind of worked my way up, and then really started our own practice about 8 years ago, where we went fully independent, really focusing on, what I would call the financial aspect and financial planning aspects of wealth management, really focusing on goal-oriented strategies and really using that to generate, wealth so people could, achieve both their short, medium, and long-term goals over time. So we focus on that area, and then we generally find that once we have a real like clear understanding of what the client needs, the rest of it starts to fall into place, like investment management and tax management as well, based off what we're trying to accomplish.
Cool. Yeah, because I'm changing my language here recently because it's not like I'm in real estate sales. It's about we're in wealth building. It's like how do
Yeah.
we help our clients build wealth through real estate? And you do the same thing by incorporating the financial piece into the wealth management. I think you're
Yeah,
on.
I mean, we actually marry quite well. I mean, if you're truly holistic on a wealth management side, you can't just be like, stocks only, not investing like in real estate. I think there is a marriage there. There is actually an opportunity where one is, something's better than the other one. So to be truly, agnostic, I mean, you really do need to look at the big picture. And that's why we do focus on the planning aspect, because at the end of the day, what is best for the client is what you should be doing. And there are certain aspects where one can be better for a specific client, right? We have a lot of younger clients, especially, kids of our clients that are looking to buy a home. Well, that is the priority over investing necessarily long term in an investment account
Right.
sometimes, right? So we want to make sure they're well positioned for that, make sure they're in the right types of accounts today so that can happen quicker. And we understand that that money's probably going to be leaving us at some point because they're trying to, start their lives.
Yeah, so it comes and goes and comes and goes.
Yeah.
So how does so if so I do a lot of work with first-time home buyers, and they're the ones that are going to see this. So how do they begin?
Well, the number one step is to just begin. I mean, have a conversation with somebody. You don't really want to, hope for the best. And what I generally find that a lot of people do is they kind of just start trying to put money in a checking account and they're really aimlessly trying to save. Now, better than nothing, no argument. You are saving and you are growing your positive net worth, but there's really no strategy behind it. And there's a lot of tools out there that can, accelerate that. And having a plan in place to actually do that and understanding what's a realistic time frame is really important to do that. Some people think they're going to be buying a home in 6 months. It's just not realistic. It's maybe more like 2 to 5 years. Unfortunately, that is just the reality with, especially living in Toronto. It is very expensive to get into the housing market.
Right.
And that time can be your ally if you actually use it and plan it properly. So, I mean, number one step is you're not supposed to know all the details of these kind of things. That's why professionals like me exist. Like call someone, reach out to them, and actually, engage their services. But also understanding, what is a realistic time frame, and then understanding the different, accounts and investments that are available to you. So, I mean, obviously, the one that most people would know about today is the FHSA, the First Time Home Buyer Savings Account. It's a brilliant account. Honestly, it's amazing. You're getting a way to reduce your income like an RRSP, and you're getting the benefits of a tax or savings account where you pull the money out and you don't pay tax. So definitely would look at that as probably the first step to kind of, from an investing standpoint. But it's kind of what you do in those accounts. How are you investing that money so it grows at the pace of the housing market? Otherwise, you're just putting money into an account and falling behind.
So how is the first-time home buyer saving plan different from the RSP?
So I'll kind of break it down and I'll try to keep it, as simple as possible. So
It's always best. To
I'll
start.
talk about like their similarities first. So essentially how an RSP works and how an FHSA works, or first time home buyer savings account, is when you put money in, it reduces your income. So let's say you make 100 grand. You put $10,000 into an RSP or FHSA account, it'll reduce your income on paper from 100 to 90. So the government actually will only charge you tax on 90,000. But as an earner, you've actually if you're not self-employed, already pay tax on that $100,000 of income. If you're making 100 grand a year, your marginal rate, which means your tax rate on the next dollar of earned income, is generally like, in the 40s. So in that case, that $10,000 from 90 to 100 grand, you would have actually already paid $4,000 in tax on your return. So by putting that money into your FHSA account, you've essentially not earned that money. So therefore, you actually get that money back on your tax return. Now, people think when they put money in an RSP, like, oh, I get money from the government. It's not true. You're getting your own money back. And
Mm.
people really need to understand that because it's not something necessarily to be spent. But the very powerful aspect of it is you've essentially created a tax compound where you've turned $10,000 into 14,000 when you get your tax return back, which can then be reinvested again and get you that much closer to that house purchase. Now, the magic thing about an FHSA, unlike an RSP, is that when you pull the money out for a home buyer, they don't actually charge you any income. When you pull money out of an RSP, like for retirement, it actually gets added to your income. So in retirement, the benefit of an RSP is instead of earning 100 grand, you're earning maybe 30,000. You pull the 10,000 out, your income goes from 30 to 40, but you're a much lower income level, so you pay less tax. And you've avoided tax for 30 years, let's say, and you pay overall less tax when you pull it out. Big advantage. FHSA, you pull the money out, it's not added to income at all. It's tax free. So it
So then,
really isn't,
so
it's a no-brainer to
it's
do,
very
essentially.
similar to the RSPs. The RSP has a limit of 60,000 per buyer to take out for a first-time home buyer, correct?
Correct. So that's an addition. So to help, and they just increased that from 30, I think it was 35 grand maybe a couple of years ago. They
Right,
increased it to 60. So, but that is a loan. So that is
right.
different. So you can still access the RSP money, which is the way to think of it is you are borrowing on after tax dollars, or sorry, before tax dollars. Because if you actually to pull that money out, you would
It'd be
lose a big
paid,
chunk of it, 30 to
correct,
40% of the taxation. So it's actually a lot cheaper to borrow that money, but you
correct.
need to pay it back. So you have to pay it back over 15 years. So they kind of give you a grace period of the first year. But let's use an example to kind of keep things simple.
Yep.
You pull 15 grand for an RSP loan to help you buy your first home. You get a grace period of 1 year, but then you owe $1,000 a year every year for 15 years back to your RSP. And if you don't pay it, it adds to your income, which then will be taxed at your marginal rate. So if your marginal rate, is in the 40%, you'll lose,
400.
400 bucks every single year. It can be quite expensive. So you want to make sure you pay it back. You can pay it back in 1 year. If you had 15 grand, you can throw it back in there and just repay it. But you don't get the credit of reducing income when you pay it back. You're just really borrowing money from yourself and reloaning it to yourself when you have more money down the road.
Okay. And then with the first-time home buyers savings plan?
There's no loan. You don't have to pay it back. So once you pull the money out for a first time home purchase, it just pulled out tax free, no loan, no payback, no nothing. It's tax free. So it's better for a home purchase plan. So it gives you the benefits of the RSP on the way in, and then it acts like a tax or savings account afterward because it grows tax free and there's no penalty to pull the money out and no taxes.
So
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 it's
that's better now than the RSP.
correct. Yeah, it's
Okay.
better in every possible way than the RSP.
Because I think that's where confusion happens. It happens in my departments as well.
Yeah.
It's like understanding that, because the first time home buyer savings plan is so new, there were people who are already doing the RSP and are like, well, do I do that or do I do this? And which one makes more sense? And you're saying the first time home buyer's savings plan makes more sense for a first time home buyer than necessarily the RSP. But they
It's
can,
not even a question because you can
but they
actually
can,
roll your FHSA into your RSP later in life too, right? And it's actually a separate contribution limit. So if you're a high earner, you're going to do both. If you can only do one, you're gonna do the FHSA first, and then you'll roll into the RSP later. And if you're a really low earner, you might want to actually defer that and actually, save that room for when you are a higher earner. And that's probably the one thing I see the most with like, we'll call it really young investors. Like we'll talk about, kids right out of university, they got debts, they're not making a lot of money, they're just starting their careers. They're like, I want to start an RSP, I want to start an FHSA. And the benefits when you have lower income are obviously lower for these tax deductible investment accounts, right? If you're putting money in and your marginal rate is 20%, you're only getting 20 cents on the dollar back when you do a contribution. It's not that beneficial. If you're making 250 grand, it's 53 cents on the dollar. It's a lot more beneficial. So in the beginning, we might be better off saving in something like a tax-free savings account because we want to defer that contribution, which we actually get to keep for when we have higher earnings later in life. If we know that buying a home is, 7 or 8 years out, if it's like imminent, we still would use it just because it's better than nothing. You're getting something back because once you buy a home for the first time, you cannot use an FHSA again, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I talk about timing and understanding what's a realistic time frame. If mom and dad are going to give you 300 grand to go buy your first home, then you might want to use it right away because you're going to buy it really soon. If it's realistically, a 21-year-old saying, I'm going to buy a home when I'm 27, 28 years old, then we might want to defer it, use a tax or savings account, wait for their earnings to increase, and then load up the FHSA later when they have higher credits to bring their income down because they'll actually net more money.
Okay. So you it the more we talk about this, the more complicated it becomes. And
It becomes complicated.
that's
Yeah.
why I'm like, talk to Rodney. Talk to a financial advisor because it's like I can give you the basics, which is what I do. And I'm like, I'm not the expert. Let's talk to the experts. I'm an experts in, real estate and land and condos and property, but I'm not the financial expert. That's why I actually, honesty forward is Rodney is my financial advisor. And it's like I rely on him to tell me, yes, do this, do that. I question him and he gives me answers. So it's like, okay, that's for me, that's the important piece. So let me just sort of I'm gonna piggyback on that last piece one more time. So
Yeah, sure.
a first-time home buyer can use their first-time home buyer's savings plan, their RSP, and their TFSA if they have all three.
They can for sure. So RSP, TFSA, there's no penalty to pull the money out. You can use non-registered checking account. It can all be combined. It's just that where are you going to get the best compound and best overall mix? And I mean, to really cut down to the short answer is it depends. It depends on your situation and it really depends on your time frame, how long you have until you buy, your
Right.
income level today, because the higher your income, and I would say the general rule of thumb is 80 grand and above, RSPs and FHSAs become more beneficial. If it's lower than that, then it's a little bit less. That can be dependent on a multitude of circumstances. But I mean, the short answer is if you don't know, talk to somebody because they can kind of take a look at your situation and actually break it down and say, hey, you have X number of dollars to save. This is kind of where you should allocate it to make sure that, over time, you're maximizing your goal and your tax efficiency so that that goal happens as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that those little bits of numbers made a big difference because it's like if you're making under 80,000, you're basically saying TFSA. If you're making over 80,000, talk to your financial advisor.
Well, it could be both, right? It also depends on like, I mean, if you're, making under 80, but you're buying next year, that's okay. I would still use the FHSA, right? Because if you don't use it, you lose it. But if it's like, you're out of school making 60 grand a year, you're just starting your career, you got a 5+ year time horizon to buy into, the housing market, you might want to start with the TFSA account because you might want that room later when your earnings go up and up and up because you're rapidly going to increase your earnings in the first 10 to 15 years of your career. That's just
Right.
generally how things go. And we would want to have that tax savings later because if you use it all when you're making 60 grand a year, you're not going to get the same benefit as you defer to make when you're making 130, 140 grand a year. If that's something that you think is reasonable.
Yeah.
So it's about a conversation at the end of the day. Just like you would have a conversation, what's the best fit for a client? Is it a
Right.
condo? Is it a house? Is it detached? Is it, semi? Is it in the city? Is it in the suburbs? Whatever,
Right.
right? It's really trying to figure out what is the best fit for their circumstance. I'll give you some very, rough, high level ideas of kind of, where to go. If you're really, really unsure and you do not want to work with a financial advisor, then I would just by default use the FHSA account because it's still a great account and it's not going to hurt you. It just could possibly add more benefit if you strategize it.
So I know people will say, well, financial advisors cost money.
Yeah, they do.
So what does that mean? I mean,
Yeah,
you
so
have
I,
you're
I mean,
like say here you're walking into my office and here's my bill like a lawyer. It's like here's my 30-minute bill. Or how does that work just in general?
I mean, it can definitely work in different ways. I feel like I'm a broken record. People charge different ways. It depends on your circumstances. Generally, if you're, a client with, like a portfolio already that needs to be managed. Most advisors work off of a management fee based off, the investments that you do have with them, right? But what that can honestly do sometimes is it can, eliminate the opportunity for smaller clientele. Like if you have no money and you're just starting out, a lot of advisors will not take you on because they get paid off a percentage of what they manage. So for instance, they get paid about 1%. If you have $500,000 portfolio, they get around $5,000 per year. That's a very rough number. Some will vary depending on that. But if you have 10 grand, it's a lot less. It's probably not, necessarily worth it for the financial advisor. So a lot of us have like a two-tiered system where we do what we would call like financial planning and consulting, and it's generally a couple $1,000 to do a financial plan. It's a one-time charge, but they'll give you planning and services for a year. It doesn't really matter what you manage. And otherwise, if you are an ongoing client, it's generally all encompassed in a portfolio and wealth management fee.
So how soon can someone start TFSA? So for instance, I'm just off the top of my head. I don't
Yeah.
do that. So if I'm 15 and say I'm working part-time in the summer, can I start a TFSA?
No, you got to be 18 to start any investment account. You actually can't open up an account until you're an adult, technically.
Okay.
What you would do in that sense is talk to mom and dad maybe they could open up something called an informal trust account in your name where they can essentially you'd be in your parents name but you would be the beneficiary as the child, and then once you actually turn 18 it can roll into your name, and there
Okay.
are some slight tax advantages to it, not a lot. Or if parents have room in their tax or savings accounts, they could open up one, do that, but technically the money was obviously in your parents name, but as a minor you can't invest and open up a registered account.
So where can someone begin to find a financial advisor? So they Google somebody? How what do you recommend? I'm gonna have your information at the end of this
Yeah,
video.
you could call
Like,
me if you want. I'm happy to have a chat. I mean, you could talk to your parents. Probably the number one is, see who they are working with if you're young. You could talk to a friend, colleague. You could talk to Tim. He knows a great guy here. You can call me, and I'm happy to help too. You could also Google online. There's a lot of advisors out there. I mean, what I would say though is that not everyone is equal. Uh, some things to look for, are they a certified financial planner? A CFP designation would be, I would say at the top of the list. That means they are accredited. They have a fiduciary to clients. And really importantly, they have experience in planning. I mean, that's where, like, I think the real value add is in our business today. I don't think it's stock picking anymore. That there is value there, but it is very minor because that information, like what stock to buy, is on the internet. There's a lot of ETFs as well that can just do the job for you.
yeah,
It's really about not how to invest. It's, where the money needs to go and how to plan the investment so I can actually get to my goals and actually have my money work towards the goals I want to outline. And it's one of those things, if you start when you're like 20 years old, even with a very small amount of money, it'll compound over time because the compounding aspect is a huge benefit to long-term growth. I mean, your money can double, every 7 to 10 years if you invest it properly. And if you just start doing that at a younger age, you just have more and more years for that to happen. So,
yeah.
very, very powerful. But yeah, I would start, Google, just talk to a professional, get a reference, parents, people that work with advisors or people that you think are smart with their money are always a good place to start.
Yep. Yeah, and I've learned that over the years because I've worked with because I worked both in the US and Canada, and I've worked with
Yeah.
different financial planners along the way, and some have been good, some have been not so good.
Yeah.
Because it's like some are focused on the big investor versus the small investor, and there's times where I was a small investor and felt like I wasn't being paid attention to, versus a big investor who's like, oh yeah, they're making 10%, but you're losing 15%. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me,
I
it's
mean,
it's like the first one may not be the only one. So it's like find someone who fits and that you relate to. I mean, I remember my first guy was a retired accountant from Boeing, and he had the driest sense of humor I ever met. And he did my taxes as my investment. And when he cracked jokes, he never it was like, how do you do that? But he was good at what he did, and he helped me begin to understand, oh, I have to plan for my future rather than just put money in the bank. Because it was like I grew up in an era where it's like, well, you just put it in a savings account and you left it in the savings account. So it's
and
like,
savings accounts used to pay, right? They don't
and they
really
used
pay
to
as much
pay
anymore.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, very very interesting kind of processes.
It's a journey. It honestly is. And I mean, like, we try not to, like, turn down clients based off size. I mean, I'm also fortunate. I'm young. I'm in my 30s still, so I've got 30 years plus. So, I mean, if I see a 20, 25-year-old kid that's, got great potential doing well, even if they have $0 to invest, you know. I could see that through for 30 years. I mean, I don't plan on retiring until my 60s or 70s. I mean, this is a business that I'm pretty passionate about. So it's it's about fit more than anything else. If someone doesn't believe in our philosophy or doesn't, want to take our advice, then it doesn't matter if you have 2 million bucks. We're probably going to say, you're probably best served somewhere else because at the end of the day, we're only as good as the partnership is, right?
Right.
So, and that at this point is more important to me than, making another buck on a new client. We really do want to help, and we want clients to get value out of it, and we want to make sure that, we're aligned on actually achieving these goals together because we take pride in that action. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, whether I mean, someone watches this and they're not necessarily a fit for me, or if they just have questions, I'm always open to having a chat and point people in the right direction. So, yeah, feel free to share my details, and if we could help one person out of it, then it was worth our time.
Yeah, and that's my thinking too, because it's like I know I'm not the best fit for everyone,
Yeah.
but people who work with me continue to work with me, and that's the piece that I appreciate. So, what types of things do you invest in? Because I know everyone's like watches the stock market, and it's like, well, let's invest in this stock because it's going up, or this one because it's long term, or this. So, do you do just stocks? Tell me a little bit about. So, for someone who's just meeting you, what types of things will you talk about as far as investment options?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a broker and portfolio manager, so we can pretty much buy it if you can name it. Now, I mean, there's certain things like unregulated securities. I mean, like Bitcoin, if you want to buy pure Bitcoin, I'm probably not your guy. We can buy ETFs though that have access to it, and I've had a couple that do the one-off thing like that. But we can buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds. We can do stock options. We can do insurance products. There's things called structured notes, private debt, private equity, you name it. Honestly, it's something that's on our shelf, and I have the ability to do. Whether I'll do it or not is a different question. I would say I'm more of a risk adverse investor. My job is to consistently grow wealth, not hit home runs. I tell clients, singles are the way to go. You look at baseball, the best teams generally are the ones that get on base the most, right? Hit singles, consistency, and it's not necessarily about hitting massive home runs all the time because you get to strike out a lot, and those strikeouts can be pretty damaging too. So it's about consistency. So we want products that really fit your goal, right? At the end of the day, one client might need a high, growth stock portfolio because they're young, they have a huge time horizon. Someone else is, 70 years old and they really just want to generate income and they can't afford the volatility, so they're going to look a little different. So every plan is customized. So the product will choose themselves based off what the client needs to do and how much they have to invest, their comfort level, etc. But there is no limitation really on what we can buy.
And so
The limitation is on me on what I choose to buy.
what I'm hearing is that your portfolio or my portfolio would change over time based on sort of my risk, aversion. It's like, well, yeah, I'm in this high growth income. I've got so I want high growth to go with me. I get to the point where it's like, well, I'm thinking about retiring, but I'm not sure. So do we rebalance so that, the market ups and downs don't catch us by surprise. Is basically what
Yeah, for sure. You'll have less exposure to the market the closer it really what risk is time, right? If you actually look at the stock market over, 7 to 10 year period, it generally goes in one direction, which is up. There's been I think one or two periods where it was flat over 10 years, one being 2001 to 2011 after you got, the tech bubble and the financial crisis kind of in one period. So you had two major corrections and it was still flat. So, I mean, generally the market is up over a full market cycle. But if you have less time than a full market cycle, number one, you're retiring and you start needing to draw money from the account. You can't afford for the for the portfolio to drop significantly because you need to actually draw money from it. It doesn't always mean that you're retired though. Another example could be I'm buying a home in 2 years. Well, that is very, there's a ton of risk in 2 years in a market. Look, even housing, right? I mean, housing is down how much over the last, 2 years? If you were to flip a home, buy and sell it with a very, very short time horizon, you could have lost 20%, right? I mean, if we look at housing from, 2 years ago to, 8 years from now over a 10-year period, you're probably going to be okay.
yeah.
So the risk really is time. So if you say, hey, I need to this money needs to be purchased to buy a car in a year, it needs to be buying a home in a year, well then our risk profile is going to be much lower. And we segregate the portfolio by goal, right? So you could have some goals that are retirement that are 30 years out, some goals that are for your house. that are, 6 months out, and some goals that, are education planning for kids that are 8 years out. They're all going to be different risk profiles because they're technically for different needs.
And so how often do you actually meet with clients? I mean, I know the answer to this, but
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, what a leading question. It depends, but I would say for the most part, it's we have 6 month reviews. So like that's where we sit down and we kind of just recap everything to make sure that we're on the same page. So that is like standard in the calendar. There's a quarterly update as well, where we just kind of reach out and say, hey, this is where you're at so far. This is kind of a little bit of a, what's been going on the quarter. We have a newsletter that goes with that, just so clients kind of have an understanding of where they fit and how things are working, because we don't always look like the market. So we want to make sure that, there's no surprises. There's nothing, burning questions. We want to give the opportunity for clients to reach out. Now, with that said, so we have like those four contacts or quarterly contact on the calendar. The door is open. So I would say most of my clients take more advantage of that. I am talking to most of my clients monthly, to be honest. And we're open as much as you need us. Our goal is to make sure you're comfortable, you understand what you're trying to do. And service is the one thing we can control. I can't control the market tomorrow, but I can definitely control if I pick up the phone and book a meeting. So, I mean, this, you're a client. I'm pretty available. Like if you message me, I'll get back to you probably within 10 minutes. Maybe it's a couple hours, but it's not later than a day.
right,
So
right.
we're there to make sure your questions are answered. That's the most important piece.
Perfect. So how can people find you specifically?
Yeah, so I know you'll share my details after this if they do want to get in touch. You could also look me up at evergreenwealthmanagement.ca. That's our website. You can check us out. There's a bunch of information on there, and you can send me an email. Rodney at egwealth.ca is my contact. So
That's an
happy to
easy one.
chat if you have any questions, and here to help.
Cool. Any sort of last sort of bits that somebody might want to hear?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like well, on the focus of buying a property and getting started and investing, I would say the one thing that I generally find people do is they delay. They think that they're not ready to start yet. They're looking for almost the perfect moment to get started, and
Mm,
that's probably the wrong philosophy, because time is your friend until it's not. And I just find sometimes people come to me and it's too late for me to really have a huge impact. Whereas I would much rather start with a smaller client that really is engaged in getting started, early, and I can really help coach and build that knowledge base over time, than someone saying, hey, I need to have like, $500,000 before I come and talk to you. Now, we always love larger clients, that we're not going to say no to a larger client, but if we could have helped manage that client, 3 or 4 years earlier to grow, we would have probably done a better job to grow their money even faster. So I would say don't delay, do the research, find the right person for you. And I would encourage you to work with someone, whether that's me or not. Um, Fit's super important. So I would say interview a few people if you are looking for someone, and, make sure, you find the right person to guide you in your path.
yeah, perfect. Well, Rodney, thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate it. I think this information will help lots and lots of folks. So thank
Happy
you
to do it,
so much,
Tim.
and we'll chat with you again soon.